Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jasodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo Hare Ramo Rama Ramo Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ramo, Hare Ramo, Rama Ramo, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashwatara Sarashi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashwatara Sarashi Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anandakori Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Harirastakora Ki Jai. Prem Sigaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. O gloriously assembled devotees, O gloriously assembled devotees, O gloriously assembled devotees, O glorious to Sri Guru and Gauranga, Guru Vimananda Hari Bolo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satashtusham. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satashtusham. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satashtusham. Lokaya Patnimashi Mataram Pita. Vidhema Chashyai Namasha Sahatvaya. Jasyam Swate Jognim Ivarana Vadaha. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satashtusham. Lokaya Patnim Ashimataram Pita. Vidhema Chasyai Namasha Sahatvaya. Jasyam Swate Jognim Ivarana Vadaha. Someone else? Smamta Payainam Jagatam Shatashtusham. Lokaya Patnimashi Mataram Pita. Vidhema Chasyai Namasha Sahatvaya. Jasyam Swate Jognim Ivaranav Adaha. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satushtusham. Lokaya Patnim Ashimataram Pita. Vidhema Chasyai Namasha Sahatvaya. Jasyam Swate Jognim Ivarana Vadaha. Vaishnavis. Samstapayainam Jagatam Satashtusham. Kaya Patnimashi Mataram Pita. Vidhema Chasyai Namasha Sahatvaya. Sate Jognim Ivarana Vadaha. Samstapayainam Enam. Raise this earth. And Jagatam, both the moving and Satashtusham, non-moving. Lokaya, for their residence. Patnim, wife. Ashi, you are. Mataram, the mother. Pita, the father. Vidhema, do we offer. Cha, also. Asyai, unto the mother. Namasha, with all obeisances. Saha, along with. Tvaya, with you. Jashyam, in whom. Swatejaha, by your own potency. Agnim, fire. Eva, likened. Arano, in the Arani wood. Adaha, invested. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O Lord, for the residential purposes of all inhabitants, both moving and non-moving, this earth is your wife, and you are the Supreme Father. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, along with Mother Earth, in whom you have invested your own potency, just as an expert sacrificer puts fire in the Irani wood. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The so-called law of gravitation, which sustains the planets, is described herein as the potency of the Lord. This potency is invested by the Lord in the way that an expert sacrificial Brahmin puts fire in the Irani wood by the potency of Vedic mantras. By this arrangement, the world becomes habitable for both the moving and non-moving creatures. The conditioned souls, who are residents of the material world, are put in the womb of Mother Earth in the same way the seed of a child is put by the father in the womb of the mother. This conception of the Lord and the earth as father and mother is explained in Bhagavad Gita 14.4. Conditioned souls are devoted to the motherland in which they take birth, but they do not know their father. The mother is not independent in producing children. Similarly, material nature cannot produce living creatures unless in contact with the Supreme Father, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam teaches us to offer obeisances unto the mother along with the Father, the Supreme Lord, because it is the Father only who impregnates the mother with all energies for the sustenance and maintenance of all living beings, both moving and non-moving. I forgot to ask you to, let's do the translation responsively. O Lord, for the residential purposes of all inhabitants, both moving and non-moving, this earth is your wife, and you are the Supreme Father. We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, along with Mother Earth, in whom you have invested your own potency, just as an expert sacrificer puts fire in the Irani wood. So, this is a really poetic verse this morning. Maitreya continues talking to Vidura. For the residential purposes of the inhabitants, he's talking both the moving and non-moving. Bhumi is your wife. For that purpose, Bhumi is your wife, and you are the Supreme Father. We offer our respectful obeisance to you with Mother Earth. I was thinking this is such a nice example of how this philosophy is fully personal. Maitreya is not seeing or experiencing the universe as a dead, lifeless void, but rather one of purpose and life at every level. So the Vedic literature sees purpose in the lives of Earth's inhabitants. For living entities wishing to try to be the centre of existence and not servants, this material world is given to us as our place of activity. Each of us is being acted on by material nature while we try to fulfill our self-centered desires. That is why, there's a purpose behind all the lives of the living entities, small and big, moving and non-moving, that they're all working out, going through birth after birth, until we get to that point of realizing that we are not the supreme enjoyer, that actually we are servants. Srila Prabhupada comments, because we are conditioned by the material body, we seek pleasure in matter. And of course that's not compatible with with our innate spiritual nature. Conditioned means we have completely identified with this body. And therefore we seek pleasure in matter, because the body is made of matter. Gradually, over many lifetimes, hopefully shorter rather than longer, we learn about the fruitlessness of this endeavour, trying to squeeze enjoyment out of matter. The many different forms of living entities all have a place and a purpose. The Bhagavatam sees purpose in all forms of life, moving and non-moving. All living entities in this universe are on this sojourn of body after body, of countless bodies. The Vedic philosophy talks to us of an evolution of the soul, whereas the material philosophy tries to cobble together out of evolutionary theory that one body changes to another. But the Vedic philosophy says no. All of the bodies, 8,400,000 different bodies, were created by the Supreme Lord according to our desires. It's described, we are the architects of our next body right now, according to our desires. Not that one form of body turns into another, but the soul travels from one type of body to another in this journey of learning that we're on. So I was thinking after reading the verse, I can't worship the Supreme Lord without also caring for Mother Earth, Bhumi. It's described for the purposes of the living entities. Here the earth is described as the wife of the Supreme Lord, because she's creating the bodies for the living entity. She's creating everything that we need for this birth. She's described in today's verse as his wife. It means my desires cannot be unlimited, which is what we experience on a material level, unlimited desires. They cannot be unlimited because Mother Earth cannot sustain unlimited desires. Srila Prabhupada's comment way, way back about high thinking and simple living is inescapable. We've all heard that. He said simple living and high thinking. And I was thinking though that simple living only comes about because of high thinking. If we have that, if our mind and consciousness is absorbed in higher thinking, in this philosophy, then our desires are simple. If we are absorbed in material activities, then our desires are unlimited, because the mind is unlimited. But also, as we're reminded here, as the earth is a mother to us, so Krishna is the Supreme Father. I was thinking, you hear a lot of environmental people who recognize the earth as being the mother, but not so often that spiritual philosophy is introduced where we also recognize that there is a Supreme Father creating all the living entities. As conditioned souls, we are put in the womb of a mother in the same way the seed of a child is put in the mother's womb by the father. As conditioned souls, we are put in the womb of Mother Earth in the same way the seed of the child is put in the mother's womb. The earth provides the very ingredients for our bodies. The body is on loan to us. We have it for a certain time, and then it is returned to the earth. As soon as we are placed in this material world, we are acted on by the laws governing this world. We experience struggle, disease, and we are forced to grow old. From the instant of birth, the clock of Kala, or Krishna's time factor, starts ticking because we have identified with matter. This sojourn of countless bodies goes on and on until again we revive our relationship with Krishna and uncover our real spiritual identities. Maitreya Muni says in today's verse, "We offer our respectful obeisances unto you, along with Mother Earth, in whom you invested your own potency." I was thinking also it's really interesting that he's talking to Vidura, and Vidura is an equally advanced devotee. But they're relishing just talking these topics between one another. So Maitreya says that the Supreme Lord has invested his own potency in this planet. So these special arrangements within this earth are not just the result of dull, mundane, blind forces. As Srila Prabhupada said in the purport, by this arrangement of the Supreme Lords, the world becomes habitable. There are so many conditions around this planet that like the physics behind the planet, that are just inconceivable. Prabhupada mentions in the purport, just like a Brahmin can produce fire from a Arani wood by the potency of his mantra, the potencies of Krishna that Krishna has invested in this world make it suitable for all living entities. Like you think of that thin little layer of atmosphere around the planet, without which we'd all be burnt to a crisp. So many conditions that have to be just perfectly arranged. In the verse today, it mentions this Arani wood. So I looked it up, and Arani wood is, in traditional fire yajnas, the Brahmins use this specific type of wood, which I think comes from a banyan tree, which is a type of fig. And rather than using a gas lighter to light the sacrificial fire, they use this wood, and they have like a grinding mechanism where they churn the wood or turn it backwards and forwards, and then they can create fire. So then they start that little fire from some little embers to get the sacrificial fire going. So that is the Arani wood. And so Prabhupada said, just like the Brahmins chant mantras into the wood to make it burst into flames, so Krishna has put so many of his potencies into this universe. For example, where it says here in the verse, you have invested your own potency, he says, in Mother Earth, in whom you have invested your own potency, talking of the Supreme Lord. So Prabhupada comments that one form of this Lord's invested potency, as he said, is the so-called law of gravity. So science obviously recognizes the law of gravity, but even so we call it the law of gravity, but that doesn't really explain what it is. It gives it a name. As kids, I was thinking at primary school, I'm not sure if they teach it still, but we're all told that story of Isaac Newton. He was supposed to be sitting under a tree and he happens to see an apple fall. We all heard that. So he was pondering, why does it fall straight to the earth? What is that, effect, that phenomena that makes the apple straight to the ground? So he's credited with discovering this law of universal gravitation. And we call it the law of gravity, but just by giving it a name doesn't really describe the complexity, the amazing, inconceivable nature of this thing that's going on. It's one of the properties built into the universe by the Supreme Lord, whereby planetary bodies have this quality where they exert attraction on one another. Although I was thinking this morning, it's not just on that massive scale. Even atomically, the law of gravity is working. There's like not a competition, but there's an electronic attraction between subatomic particles, but everything is being also worked on by gravity. As Srila Prabhupada says, because of his divine arrangement, the world becomes habitable. Gravity is one of these things. This effect of this attraction between different bodies, that is gravity, is so finely tuned. I was thinking, so I know the audience will insist that I give some details of what are the maths behind gravity. So they say that these two objects attract each other with a force that is directly proportional to the product of their masses and is inversely proportional to the distance between them. So the math behind that produces an effect called the gravitational constant, that everywhere on this planet is this gravitational constant. As we know, the Earth is held in a strict relationship with the Sun, for example. Not too far away, not too close. We know at the moment, we've all heard of climate change, for example, that just because there's a slight tweak in the atmosphere, temperatures are changing on the planet. So you can imagine if that beautifully arranged distance between the Earth and the Sun and the Moon, if any of those things changed, none of us would be here. We feel the effect of the Moon's gravitational pull on our planet as tides. And scientists also acknowledge that because of the Moon's gravity, like as we know, the Earth is on a tilt as it's going around the Sun. So that tilt is held in place also by the Moon's gravity, apparently. So, according to what I was reading in the background of this verse, there are 6 of these cosmological constants that scientists have discovered up to now within our universe. The ratios between these forces, like I was saying, electronic force, subatomic force, for example, or gravity. There's another constant that means the entire universe is expanding at a certain rate. We know that it's all because Krishna is behind it, but so the ratios that appear between these different forces are finely tuned. The strength of gravity, for example, relative to the atomic forces that hold matter together, that's one of the constants. The density of matter itself, the amount of expansion going on, the strength of these different constants relative to each other is held in perfect balance. From galaxies and stars all the way down to atoms and subatomic particles, there is an inconceivable level of fine-tuning. If any of these finely tuned parameters were changed by a hair's breadth, life as we know it would not exist. As scientists have gained more knowledge, like since the time of Darwin 200 years ago, as scientists have found more and more information about the complexity of this arrangement that we live within, it's mind-boggling. They now believe there has to be forms of matter and energy in the universe apart from what they can observe. They call this dark matter and dark energy. Somehow there has to be this huge, massive stuff to balance the forces that they can observe, apparently. If we were to change a few of these numbers, as I've said, the force of gravity, for example, or the electrical charge on tiny atoms, the universe would be completely different, or it would not exist at all. A few examples of finely tuned factors that make this universe possible. For example, if the strong nuclear force was a little different, hydrogen wouldn't exist. And we know hydrogen is present everywhere. It's part of water, it's around us, it's part of the air. If electromagnetic forces were a little stronger or weaker, atomic bonds and then complex molecules which make up our bodies and everything around us, they wouldn't form. The universe seems to have been exquisitely set up for life to exist, and even little changes in these numbers would make life as we know it impossible. As one Nobel-winning physicist stated, this is a very special universe. It's remarkable that it has come about just this way. If the laws of physics weren't just the way they are, we couldn't be here at all. The sun couldn't be here. The laws of gravity and nuclear laws, magnetic theory and so on have to be just the way they are for us to be here. While I was studying this, I sort of disappeared down that black hole of scientific information on what is gravity and stuff like that. In fact, there was one example I was reading where they were saying, so this is sort of the maths behind it, but there's a warning. These figures are about 10 years old, so they're out of date now. Their knowledge is only current for a short time, it seems. So, I was thinking though, so how little a change would it take to disrupt Krishna's divine arrangement? Like how finely balanced are these constants? For example, gravity. So I found an amazing video where they talk about the slightest degree of change in gravity, which would just mean that the universe would just expand to nothing or it would collapse in on itself. So how slight a change could you make without this happening, or would it take for it to ruin everything? So this scientific video said, imagine you've got a dial and you're going to dial up gravity a bit or dial it down a bit. So this dial, think of a big dial, and it's divided into, get this, anyone do maths here? It's divided into 10 to the 60th parts around the little dial. You know, you've got like on a dial on a radio or a TV, 10 to the 60th parts. To give you an idea, of course, we all know a million is 10 to the 6. So 10 to the 60th, or to give another comparison, there are only 10 to the 14th power number of cells in our very body. So our dial that we're going to tweak gravity up or down a bit has to have increments so small. So there's 10 to the 60th increments. Now, if we tweak gravity by one of those increments, either up or down, either the universe would have expanded so rapidly, no planets or stars would form, or it would just collapse. I mean, this is inconceivable, that the tuning is so fine to allow life to exist. And still, the scientists try to come up with theories so that they don't have to acknowledge there must be a divine creator behind this. They have one sort of theory that, well, there are gazillions of universes, and this one just happens to have the figures like this so that we can exist, but there's probably millions of other ones where the figures are all different. But there's no evidence for this. It's just sort of like a desperate theory so that I don't have to accept that there's a controller that I should submit to, that I'm a servant. The Vedic literature talks of unlimited universes, and Srila Prabhupada has told us again and again that life exists everywhere, although it exists in forms we can't imagine. I was thinking, even on this planet, there are life forms that we can't conceive of. How could something be alive under those conditions? I've mentioned before, there are worms at the bottom of the ocean, for example, and these worms are very happy in this warm, bubbling water where they have like a volcanic vent that's coming from the center of the planet. So there's all this poisonous sulfurous gas coming out at the bottom of the ocean, so the pressure would be inconceivable. But these little guys live there, even on this planet. So scientists do admit the miraculousness of this fine-tuning. A physicist at Oxford says, if anyone claims not to be surprised by the special features of our universe, he's hiding his head in the sand. These special features are surprising and highly unlikely. Well, there's an Australian professor, Paul Davies, who's pretty famous. He says, there is for me powerful evidence that something is going on behind it all. It's pretty miraculous. Something's going on behind all this. It seems as though someone has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming. Mind you, these people still trying to come up with a theory to justify it according to some mechanical or materialistic explanation. In today's purport, Srila Prabhupada talks of this idea of the Lord and the earth as mother and father. He quotes in Bhagavad Gita 14.3, the material nature, in 14.3 the Bhagavad Gita says, the material nature is not the cause of the birth of living entities. The seed is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they only seem to come out as products of material nature. As Srila Prabhupada used to preach, that life only appears from life. That life does not come from dead chemicals or dead matter. As Prabhupada mentions in the purport, the conditioned souls who are residents of the material world are put in the womb of Mother Earth in the same way the seed of the child is put by the father in the womb of the mother. So we can see that the male is only an agent of procreation or fertilization. The potency is coming from a higher source. And then the mother grows the body of a new living entity within her very own body. And that the elements to grow that body are present here on the planet, ready for that body to grow, provided by the Supreme Lord. The Bhagavad Gita goes on and tells us that apart from the Supreme Lord, there are two indivisible natures or categories. There is the category, the material nature, and then there's another category, the living entity. So this goes against material scientific theory, doesn't it? That there are two categories that are all eternally existing. There is a material energy, but then there is a superior energy, the living entity, that acts on the material energy. Scientists try to argue that there's only one energy, that is matter, and that somehow or other, by effects on matter at some point or somehow, that this matter which is dead suddenly, somehow or other, was given consciousness. They've got various theories to explain how the inconceivable conditions could have come about, conditions that are needed for life, how these conditions could have come about by accident. But actually, as time's going on, even for material scientists, it's getting harder and harder for them to refuse the idea that there is a supreme controller, a divine intelligence behind everything. So I was thinking, if the Supreme Lord is possessed of such immense, inconceivable potencies that we've been looking at today, so where is the possibility of us approaching him? But to quote Srila Prabhupada, when we're in a service attitude, our teeny efforts to please him, they attract him. So our service attitude can attract Krishna. And by his mercy, he can manifest himself to us. Prabhupada says, if you engage yourself with this service attitude, simply by the method of service, God will reveal himself to you. By your own teeny effort, you cannot see God. But if he chooses, he can reveal himself to you. I was thinking that combination of words that Srila Prabhupada always used, devotional service, that we might experience that feeling of devotion, but Prabhupada always put it with that active word of service. That devotion doesn't really exist or manifest itself without active service. I was listening in a class recently. So when I turn away from Krishna, when I try and turn my back on the Supreme Lord, I also turn my back on my unique self, on my real nature. If I turn my back on Krishna, on the Supreme Lord, I also turn my back on my own spiritual nature. So Krishna has given us this illusory existence that we can try within the material world, where I can try to be master. Although I try to do this despite there's so many clues to the contrary which indicate I'm not master, that I'm forced to be a servant. When we turn our back, when we turn back to reviving our relationship with Krishna and again see ourselves as a servant, we feel a sense of satisfaction, because that is the natural, the real nature of ourselves. When I'm rendering service to Krishna and the devotees, there's an inherent sense of satisfaction that you feel that no one needs to tell you about. We all feel that. And that sense of satisfaction, fulfillment, is not existing outside, in the outside world. That's why when people come here, they're feeling there's something here that they haven't come in contact with before. Srila Prabhupada talks of, I heard him say this just recently in a class, he talks of petty materialism. So that word petty means small time, yeah? Nothing big. He says, by practice, which is what we're doing, a sadhana, we can turn away from the petty desires of the mind. These desires don't disappear, but with practice and continual engagement, we can see these desires actually for what they are. They're petty. That we don't give away that which we really want, the thing that is really important to us. We don't give that away for something that's short term. The more we continue this practice, the more constant that feeling of being satisfied and fulfilled it comes about. One last comment. This process of turning our attraction away from the material energy and back to Krishna is this path of bhakti yoga. That is the path we are engaged on. Thank you very much, Prabhus. Anyone have any realizations or comments they would like to add? Anything? Any corrections? I was pretty amazed to when I read that thing about that gravity, if you just tweaked gravity by the slightest, 10 to the 60th amount, everything would fall apart. And that's only one of the constants that are behind the universe. That everything is just balanced so finely and so beautifully that life as we know it can go on. Hare Krishna.